Chapter 7, Weavers, Iron Smelters and Factory Owners. This is the topic which we are going to discuss in this chapter. So students, in the previous part of the lesson, in the previous chapters, we have discussed what and how the Britishers have captured their control over the Indian land. Now let us go back to the days when the Britishers did not capture our country. How was the life of the people those are weaving, iron smelters and the factory owners? So in this chapter, we will be finding out before the Britishers turned as the workshop of the world. Yes, it is around 1850s. The British is considered as the workshop of the world. Why was British considered as the workshop of the world? British was considered as the workshop of the world because the Industrial Revolution took birth in the Britain only. So the transformation from the handmade goods to machine-made goods or man-made goods to machine-made goods is called the Industrial Revolution, which happened from 1780 to 1820. So during this period, the Britishers are upcoming with their industries. So they want to produce the products which can be sold across in the global market. So they want to find out the markets for their places. So in this chapter, we will be discussing and analyzing how the Industrial Revolution in Britain showed its impact in the Indian trade, on the lives of the weavers, on the lives of the iron smelters and the factory owners. Let us now try to find out the details. How was the Indian trade before the Britishers have captured the Indian authority or the land or Indian land into their control? Indian textiles and the world market. Before 1750s or at the timeline of 1750, Indian products are India is the largest producer of cotton before the Britishers conquered India. Before Britishers gained control over the Indian land and started to produce according to their company's requirements and profits to earn huge profits. So in 1750, India was the largest producer of cotton during that period, and it is sold in not only in our country, it is sold in various parts of the world, especially in Southeast Asia, Sumatra, Java, Pangong, all these places where our Indian products are sold. Other than this, we also can remember or trace that Indian products are valuable across the European and the Asian countries, the western parts, by history of the words. The history of the words tell us that how the other countries came to know about the Indian products. The Arabs first discovered Mosul. Mosul is the name of the Indian cloth which is sold in the present day Iraq. So in this place, when they discovered the Indian cloth, they called this as Mosul. So this is coming from India, so they gave the name as muslin. So this muslin is the finest fabric of cotton which is available from India, which is very costly during those days. The rich and the elite classes only used to use this one. And we also have the Portuguese coming into our land, 1498. So they started to call the products spices what they are taking from the country, from the Calicut region. So they call this as calico. Portuguese have a name of calico. Arabs called it as muslin. And as per the ledgers and the records of the order book, it is 5,89,000 pieces of cloth was ordered, in which there are 98 varieties of cloth which has to be delivered, which also shows for us that there is a huge demand for the Indian cloth, at the same time widely accepted across in the European and in the West Asian countries. Moving on further, what are the different names for the Indian cotton cloth? We have the different names for the Indian cotton cloth like chintz, kosais and bandana. It is around 1680s. The British Queen herself used to dress in the cotton clothes which are coming from India. So this shows how popular and how comfortable the Indian cloth is, and how prestigious and privileged the people used to feel when they use the cloth which they are getting from Indian cotton, or the product which is made of Indian cotton. So we have a word here, bandhana. Bandhana's meaning, it is actually the cloth which is tied around the neck, but it has taken from the word which is derived from the Hindi language. Bandhana means tying the things. So like this, each and every word which is used today in the different parts of the world has originated with the Indian cloth. Indian cloth associated words like muslin, calico, we have chintz, we have kosais, we have bandhana. So all these words also trace that Indian cotton is famous across the western part of Asia as well as the European countries. Indian textiles in the European markets. Till now we have discussed that 1850 the Britain turned as a workshop of the world with the changes in the technology. It emerged as a workshop of the entire world because the industrial revolution started to get initiated from the Great Britain. And coming to the India's background, before the Britishers gained political power over the Indian land, 1750s, India is the largest producer of cotton till that time. Indian cotton is sold in the Southeast Asian countries and is also taken by the traders from the Arab traders, and it is sold in the other parts of the world, that is in the western parts of Asia and also in the European countries. Indian cotton is world famous. Indian cotton is worn by Britain Queen in 1680s, which shows the quality of the Indian cotton. Now moving on to understand how is the Indian textile market reaching to the European market. Indian textiles are not only sold in India, but they are also sold in the other countries, not only in Asian countries but also in the European countries. It is around 18th century, wool and silk started to be sold at various corners of the world, and in 1720, as Indian product is getting more popular and famous, the Britishers then only attained the industrial revolution and they want to produce the cotton. When they are producing the cotton, that is not matching with the quality of the Indian cotton. So in order to make themselves competent and restrict the Indian products in the European market, especially in UK, they passed certain laws to stop the printed cotton cloth sale in the country, so which will avoid the sale of the Indian cotton cloth in the European market, especially in UK. So like this, an act was passed to secure the England market into their control by the local traders by influencing the parliament. With this also we can understand that the act itself is named as Calico Act. So Indian products are most durable, finest quality and most competitive to the Europeans in the initial years when they were competing with the Indian cloth. Indian designs are now being imitated because the Indian products are banned. So we want the similar products to be sold in the market, which is already famous in the market. So they start to imitate the products and the prints which are there on the Indian cloth. So it has been imitated. In 1764, spinning jenny was invented by Richard Arkwright. This invention of spinning jenny made the cotton industry to produce huge number of cloth or large amount of cloth, and which is at very less cost. This revolution happened in 1786 with the changes in the spinning jenny. The changes got revolutionized completely. Now instead of weaving less cloth, which is very costly, they started to weave more cloth which is at very less availability of the cost. It's very cheap, in simple words. So now moving on to India, French people, Dutch people, English people started to trade with India. They used to get the products, sell it in our country, but still they used to get a stiff competition from the Indian cotton cloth. They could not match with the quality of the Indian cotton cloth. They used to import silver and gold from their own respective countries in order to buy the products what they require from our country, which shows that their products what they are selling in our country are not getting so much profit for them. But after the Battle of Buxar, the political power went into the hands of the Britishers. So the import of silver and gold has been stopped because the revenue which is coming for them from the Bengal tax collections, that is transferred to buy cotton cloth from India and then send it back to the Britain without importing silver and gold from their home country. Like this, Indian textiles in the European markets are banned initially because of the stiff competition by passing a Calico Act. Indian designs are imitated by the Britishers to get or to grab the market which the Indian cloth used to have before banning the Indian cloth. And in 1764, the spinning jenny was discovered by Richard Arkwright, who got it revolutionized later and made the production of the cotton cloth very easy, and who can produce more amount of the cotton cloth. With this, they need the international markets to sell their product. So the French people, Dutch people and the English people moved on in searching of the global markets to sell the finished products. So even then the three countries came to India to sell their products. Indian cotton cloth gave a stiff competition for them in the initial years, though it's not so much mechanized and revolutionized like that of those countries. So it shows that Indian cotton cloth is really very good in quality, and the finest quality of cotton cloth is available in our country. And with the gain of the political power, the French people, English people used to import gold and silver to buy the spices and all the other products what they require in our country to sell in their countries, because they don't have much amount of revenue for them to buy the products in our country which are costly according to them. So they used to import the gold and the silver. But as the time passed on, Britishers started to gain the political power after the Battle of Buxar in 1764. They decided to stop the gold and the silver imports, and the revenue what they are getting from the tax collections, that will be diverted to buy the products what they require for their home country and send it from here to there without importing gold and silver. Chapter 8, Civilizing the Native and Educating the Nation. In this chapter, we will be discussing, as we all know that the Britishers actually want to conquer the Indian territories. They came initially to do trade. Later, their interest changed to conquer the lands, to generate more revenue. They want to control the revenue of the country. They want to expand their business. They want to earn huge profits. Along with this, on the other hand, they started to believe that they have to take the responsibility to civilize the natives. They felt that the Indians are not civilized. They need to be civilized. They need to be trained properly according to the ideas of the West. So, what happened with the introduction of the English education to the Indians? How did the Indians react to this? This is the base point of this lesson. In this lesson, we will be dealing explicitly about what was India's traditional educational structure, how the Indian education system was there before the introduction of the English, what are the factors or the conditions that favored for the establishment of English education in our country, how did Rabindranath Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi react for the introduction of English education in our country. We will now see how the Britishers used to view the Indian education. It was a person in 1783 named William Jones who arrived to Calcutta, joined as a junior judge in the court which was started by the Britishers. He was a jurist. Along with being a jurist, he was also a linguist who was fond of different languages. He learned from Oxford Greek, Latin. He also knew French, English, Arabic from his friends, and Persian. After coming to India, he started to learn Sanskrit and grammar as well as poetry. So with this we can understand that he is a good learner. He observes many things. He knew the languages like Greek, Latin, French, English, Arabic, Persian, Sanskrit, grammar and poetry. With the favoritism towards Sanskrit, as he is understanding the language of Sanskrit, he started to learn what are the text subjects that are taught to the Indians in the Indian old colleges or schools. We would rather say they are the educational institutions, but not schools or colleges. We have old set of pathshalas, gurukulas, which were existing in the ancient days. So he started to study about the subjects like law, philosophy, religion, politics, morality, arithmetic, medicine. So after looking at all these subjects and studying them in detail, he started to understand that the Indian culture has attained its glory during the past but not now. So in order to capture the Indians' hearts, in order to know about India much, in order to enhance the Indians' dignity, at the same time, in order to understand India much clearer, we need to know about the past. So with this idea, he made some of his friends who had a similar view to join with him, like Henry Thomas and Colebrook, Nathaniel Hallett. So these three formed as a group with William Jones and formed the Asiatic Society. Asiatic Society also started to publish journals, Asiatic journals. So this group of people who formed and started to show interest towards the Indian art, Indian literature, Indian arithmetics, Indian religions, Indian customs, Indian traditions were branded as Orientalists, those who study about the Asian culture, Asian languages, Asian literatures. These people are called Orientalists by the Western communities. So, like this, William Jones established the first Asiatic Society in our country in Calcutta. Along with this, after having acquired knowledge about the subjects which are taught in our country during the olden days, during the ancient time, he told that glory of the Indian culture is in the past, not now. So for the Britishers have to become the guardians. Once they know what is the glory of Indians, then they will become the guardians. Once they become the guardians, after understanding what are Indians or what is their glory, then we can master over the Indians as we know what they are. It's very easy for us to tackle them. At the same time, we can also win the hearts of the natives. When you win the hearts of the natives, automatically you can command over them. So for this, they also proposed to set up of institutions to spread the old ancient literature in various colleges. Here, a madrasa was set up with this initiative in 1781, and a Hindu college madrasa was set up at Calcutta in 1781. 10 years later, a Hindu college was set up at Benares in 1791. So from this we can understand here very clearly, Indians are not uneducated as the Britishers thought. Indians are not uncivilized as the Britishers thought. Indians are highly civilized, highly tolerant. At the same time, Indians also studied the subjects which are taught in the Western universities. That's what he understood, William Jones, after learning about the subjects which are taught here. The subjects which are discussed by Aristotle, the subjects which are discussed by Plato, the subjects which are discussed by the eminent people of the West were also discussed equally by the people in India, like law and philosophy, religion, morality, politics, arithmetic, medicine. All these make him to come to an opinion that there was glory in the past of the Indian culture, which means that now there is no glory after the arrival of the Britishers. Something happened to that. We need to revive the glory of the Indians. Then automatically the Britishers will become the guardians of that, which will make the Indians to support the Britishers. Later, Britishers can become the masters. So what happened to this? Did the Britishers continue establishing colleges for the spreading of Oriental literature or not? How did the other Britishers react? What happened next?